Okay, the last step in our risk management process is planning our risk responses, how we avoid the risks. We've been through the process of convincing the sponsor to even do risk management, and then our second step was to identify risk, and we talked about a couple of ways of doing that. But again, we're talking about 2 or 3 risks, not 15, particularly on a small project. So we've identified the risk. Then we analyze the risk. We talked about qualitative techniques and then quantitative techniques. But either way, we come up with a justification for doing something about the risk based on that analysis. And now we come to the last step, which is planning our risk responses, and there are 4 of them. Let's start with the example of the risk of turnover among our engineers during the life of the project. And we talked about that having a high probability of occurring and having a high magnitude if it does. And we also talked about quantifying it, so we had a 20% probability of it happening and a $50,000 impact if it did. Either way, we're going to use that to justify having corrective action. The first of the strategies is to avoid the risk, an avoidance strategy, and that means we change the project plan to completely avoid the risk. In the example of our engineers doing a design, we may buy a canned design or a canned piece of software, so the engineers have no work or limited work on the project. And that is avoiding the risk by changing our project plan. Now, there may be some costs and consequences. Buying it from an outside vendor, buying a canned software product or a canned design may not be quite as good as what the engineers could have done. So we have those trade-offs here. But avoidance is one possible strategy for this risk of turnover among our engineers. Okay, the first risk response strategy was avoidance, and the second one is mitigation. And that's where we take actions that reduce the probability of the risk and or reduce the size of the impact if it does occur. In our example of turnover among our engineers on the project, we might mitigate the risk by paying those engineers a project completion bonus. In other words, we're saying to those engineers, if you stay through the life of the project, we'll pay you a $1,500 bonus. That would probably lower the odds of turnover and also decrease the impact if people did resign. So that's mitigation, and it doesn't make the risk go away, but it reduces the harm to the project. Our third risk response strategy is to transfer the risk. Continuing the example of turnover among our engineer staff on the project, we would transfer the risk by hiring an outside engineering consulting firm. We would have them do the engineering work on our project, and they would bear the risk of turnover among an engineering staff. Now, we'd pay for that, certainly. Contracting out for it is most likely to be more expensive than using our own people. So it's not free, but we have transferred the risk to another party. Transferring in general is the idea we buy insurance against the risk. And so that would be transfer with our engineering turnover risk. The fourth risk response strategy is to accept the risk. We decide that transferring or avoidance or mitigation are too expensive or not possible. So we decide we're going to accept the risk. We're going to run it. We're going to watch out for turnover. And we're also going to develop a contingency plan of exactly what we're going to do if we have turnover among our engineers. And that's the fourth strategy. With this, we are monitoring this risk, and we might say, okay, we've got some risk triggers, some early warning signs about turnover. And if we see, as an example, that these engineers are using up a lot of their personal days out interviewing, that might be a good signal that it's time to start planning the implementation of our contingency plan, which might be something like contracting with independent engineers and bringing them in. And we may have in the contingency plan, we may have identified them already. And we've gotten organizational approval to hire them, so we don't have a panic when the engineers quit. We simply implement the contingency plan. Now, as I said at the beginning, we can use all four of these on the same risk. And that's not unusual. If none of the four strategies by themselves get rid of the risk entirely, we may have to use a couple of them. But that's what we present to our project sponsor for the 2 or 3 major risks our project faces. Well, the sun's going down and here on Kauai, and I think it's time for us to finish this risk management discussion. Thanks for listening.
A big part of a project manager's success is based on communicating in meetings with individuals or small groups and in making presentations. Our individual instruction courses give you practice in these areas in live online sessions. Your instructor will play the role of the person with whom you're working. The sessions are a lot of fun and our students and instructors enjoy them. You'll get live practice thinking on your feet and answering the questions that PMs have to answer. It's just the two of you working privately, and if you get off track, your instructor will call timeout, give you feedback and coaching, and then back up the meeting so you can try again. Please consider one of our courses.